All right, welcome back. In this module, we're going to go over some key aspects of the multi-factor authentication server. In this module, we will cover, we'll go over installation,
overview of the user section,
how to enable Radius, IIS, LDAP, and Windows authentication,
company settings that you can customize,
directory integration,
how to use custom email formatted messages to send to your users,
and the user portal. So first off, we're going to go out to the multi-factor server management portal, and we're going to download the latest version. I've already done this, so now it's in our downloads. I'm going to go click the setup. Click yes on the UAC prompt.
and sometimes the setup can take a little while to launch. So this is something that has been going on for a while, right?
Yeah. And it also depends on what your server load is and what server OS you are using.
Absolutely. Now, for installation here, once we get it installed, we will be using those activation credentials that you generated, right?
Correct. We will generate a set of activation credentials and use that to associate the server with our account.
Yeah, and again, as we mentioned in the last module, these credentials are one-time use and only good for 10 minutes. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right, now that the installer is loaded, the default directory is going to be Program Files Multi-Factor Authentication Server. If you did have an older version of Phone Factor installed, it may install to the Phone Factor directory instead. This is okay.
Once the installation starts, it is fairly quick, and it's fairly straightforward as well. All you do is launch the installer and hit Next, and it then will go to finish.
Now that the installation is finished, just click Finish, and Multi-Factor Authentication Server will start automatically. On first time load, it may take a couple minutes to load since it's creating all the files and directories. When you do load it for the first time, you'll be asked if you want to do the configuration wizard. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to skip the configuration wizard just so we can show off the features of the server. Now, if you are deploying multi-factor authentication server, you are more than welcome to use the wizard because it will help you set up the basic features and your first authentications that you're going to secure. So now that the server is up and it's requesting to activate, we'll go back to the management portal, generate activation credentials, and use them to log in. Remember, these credentials can only be used once, so generate a new set every time you install a server.
Now, Mike, the reason we're doing this is so that it associates your MFA server with your Azure account. Is that right?
Correct. This way it can track back for billing and other management portal features. Once you've got your server activated, it'll ask which group you want to join. If you had existing servers, you might see an existing group here, but since this is a brand new server and the first one in a group, we'll just use the default. Now that we've enabled it, it's going to ask us if we want to run the multi-server configuration wizard. Since we're just demoing with one server, we're not going to run this, but if you do plan to have a master and several slave servers, this is a good idea to run. Now that we've got the server installed, let's go over some of the features. This is the status page where it'll show you all the servers in a group. It will show you the master. Additionally, if there are other servers here, you can easily promote those other servers to master on the fly. This is the Users tab. This is where your multi-factor authentication server will store all users that it contains. You can even import these from Active Directory. You can also test users directly from here without having them authenticate. This is the OAuth tokens field. If you are going to use OAuth tokens to authenticate, you can add them here. This is tags. We allow you to tag users with certain descriptions so it's easier for you to manage them. These are the different windows for Radius, IIS, LDAP, and Windows authentication. We'll start with Radius. Radius can be set up where you have to add these Radius targets here. You can also select which servers will be communicating with Radius. You can also add a whitelist. Keep in mind to make Radius authentication work and be secured with MFA and other secured authentications, you do need to check the enable box. If you have questions about any of these tabs, our contextual help file will have everything described for you. In IIS authentication, it is much the same as Radius. You can submit form-based, HTTP. You can also use our event confirmation feature, which we may cover in a later session. You can also use ISAPI or native module, depending on which version of IIS you're running. Finally, you also have IP whitelist. And again, like Radius, for this IIS authentication to actually be secured with MFA, you need to check the enable button. There's also LDAP authentications we can secure. You just set up clients, targets, and select which servers, check the box to enable. Finally, there's Windows authentication, which could secure applications like LogMeIn or Terminal Server. We also have an ADFS adapter, so if you use ADFS in your environment to secure portals or, say, log into SharePoint Online, we can actually hook into those logins as well. This adapter, if you're using ADFS 3.0, can also be installed without installing the MFA server. We also have company settings page. Some of these settings are the same as the ones you would see out on the management portal.
Now, Mike, so these settings here, these settings are global settings for when you import users, right?
Yes, these are global settings that will be company-wide.
Now, can you have different users have different settings than these defaults?
Yes, you can. You can go set those settings individually for each users in the users list.
Okay.
We also have a way in the company settings here to change any of the texts that you see when you're trying to authenticate, such as notifications and text messages. You can also set which information is sent to our backend for reports. If you uncheck this information, all that will be sent is a unique identifier to find the users, not the actual username. You will also, though, have the phone number sent, since the phone number is required for the authentication to proceed. Finally, there's the email tab, which can be very useful for when you're adding users to MFA, as it can send a welcome message, or it could send other notifications such as you've changed your method or you need to enroll in your new method.
Now, one thing I'll point out about the email content is if you go to edit, by default, none of these templates have anything in the from field. You will have to populate the from field, and it could be from anyone at your company or any email address. But if you intend to send custom emails, you do need to populate the from field or it will generate an error.
Also, in these emails, you'll see variables such as this. This is where the MFA server puts in phone number, username, email address before sending out the email to your user. Next, we have the directory integration feature, which can help you synchronize users with Active Directory security groups or other directory systems. You also have filters, attributes, synchronization, where you can granularly set those synchronization settings for groups. If you want to add a synchronization with a security group, you can do a search by clicking Add. And in here, you can actually search via your company directory. You can also select which MFA servers will be doing the synchronization. Next, we have our user portal. What is our user portal? It's a self-service tool for users to change their MFA settings without actually having to have someone having physical access to the server. Typically, we see help desks utilize this so they can do password changes, phone number changes, or unblocks or PIN changes. To install the user portal, you'll need an IIS server installed, but we will go over this in a later course. In order to manage the user portal, however, you do need to add administrators.
And when you add administrators, you can select different administrators with different permissions. So you may have some administrators that are allowed to issue one-time bypasses, but may not be able to block users. This way, as you can see from the screen here, you can let them add, set a one-time bypass, or any of these other options. And that way, if you have, say, a Tier 1 help desk, they may have less administration access than a Tier 2 help desk or a full-on administrator.
That's right. Thanks, Stan. Next, we're going to go over this is the web service SDK. This is typically an advanced option if you're going to be installing a user portal server that doesn't have direct network connection to your master server, or if you want to utilize it to create your own portal. This may be covered in a later course. Next, we have the mobile app. This is if you're going to utilize mobile app. This simply shows you, is just settings for when you do set up the mobile app service, how to have your server connect to it. We may cover this in a later course as well. Finally, this is the logging option where you can set your settings, such as how big the logs can be and how many backups. It also does include a link to the log files for the MFA server where you can see them.
And when you click this View Log Files button, one thing that it does is you notice is that top file, it does create a configuration log. In case you ever have to contact support, you could send this to support and we would be able to see exact configuration of your MFA server.
Correct. This will show you every option you've set in our UI, so we'll know exactly how you're configured and what you're pointing to. And again, for help with any of these options in the MFA server, please utilize the contextual help file and it will explain everything.
And when you use the contextual help file, since it is contextual, wherever you are in the MFA server or in the MFA management portal, it will give you specific help for that section.
All right, looks like we're wrapping up this demo. In this module, we went over some key features of the multi-factor authentication server and some of the functionality it provides. In the next module, we're going to go over how to upgrade the multi-factor authentication server from an older version to the latest.
And this module will really be applicable for mostly legacy phone factor customers who are going to then migrate to Windows Azure.